Good malam, good evening, everyone. First of all, of course, I would like to extend our gratitude to the School of Graduate Studies. Here we have the representation of the school, Pak Widi. Thank you very much for, of course, for supporting this program, for allowing us to use the place and also all the facilities, and of course, fully support our program. And we would like to thank, of course, all the speakers that who have been nicely introduced by Mbak Icha, so I don't need to repeat that. And just for those of you probably who don't know, I think all of you, right, you're here because of AAS, the Association for Asian Studies, that will be held starting tomorrow. So we kind of menculik these speakers before they start tomorrow. So we can also mencuri start, yeah, mencuri start, because we happy that we can host all of you here. And then of course thank you for all the team, ICRS, CRCS, for the works hard and that makes this event possible. And thank you very much also for all the participants. So we actually, we are here this evening, of course, with a very important topic, as you can see, about the future of the study of religion in Indonesia. And just for your information, we recently, in December 2023, published a book entitled Studi Antaragama, Metode dan Praktik. This is written in Bahasa Indonesia, in which we did discuss religious studies, but also its more recent history, interreligious studies within the higher education. I don't know whether the book will be published in English. Maybe if we have high demand, we can also make it available in English. But it was actually prompted by the need to understand religion as an important social reality in Indonesia, and interreligious relations, as well as the relation between religion and the state and other society and other sectors, including politics, economy, law, and others. So I think each of you will receive a copy later of this book at the end of the talk show. So the topic this evening is very related to what we have published, the book that I just mentioned, but more importantly with our study programs, as well as with the more general needs to better understand or probably predict, as the title is talking about the future of the study of religion in Indonesia. So it's probably, we cannot say speaker, but like what would the title that is appropriate for you? Like someone who just start with some thoughts, yeah? Because it's a talk show, so it's more informal. So each of you will have a maximum of 7 minutes to start with some thought, and I will give each of you, you know, like some questions that you might want to discuss, but of course you are also free to develop. So first we will have Pak Bob Hefner. So Pak Bob, based on your decades of studies of religion in Indonesia, do you see a particular pattern of development? What recent trend do you see, and how do you think it will or should be developed in the future? So that's just you know, like a starting question, but of course you're free to talk whatever you think is important for this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Selamat malam semua, dan terima kasih banyak atas undangan ini and invitation to an acara which I think is consistent with all that I have known in the more than 40 years that I have worked with UGM, the more than 20 years that I've worked with Pak Zainal Abidin Bagir, a friend and a colleague, and a person with whom I'd like to think I share certain moral commitments. But so I thank I thank everybody here. I thank all of you for welcoming us to speak tonight. I'll move directly to the point. My major observation is not going to startle anybody. I think that Indonesia has long been one of the most important, and I would say arguably the most unique site of religious studies in its modern sense in the world. Africa, Western Europe, the United States all have their own traditions and legacies that continue to influence the way in which religion has been studied in each of those respective spheres. But the characteristics of Indonesia itself, or let's call it Nusantara, because before it was Indonesia, it was Nusantara already, have shaped the study of religion in Indonesia from the beginning, and also I think continue in a very, very positive way to give a distinctive legacy. Yes, there are shortcomings, as there are all fields of academic study, but there are also several distinctive legacies. What do I mean? Well, the first thing that strikes one about the study of religion in Indonesia that is relevant for its future has to do with a certain continuity. This is a country of more than according to how you count, 1,200 languages, 700 ethnic groups. We can quibble over the precise numbers. But this is a society in which, as the study of religion was being incorporated into its modern university format, at first in the West, but then soon thereafter, and it wasn't really that long thereafter, in Indonesia, first the Dutch East Indies, and then in an independent Merdeka Indonesia. The field of religious studies was itself being shaped in a way that made Indonesia, I think, I say this with true conviction, arguably one of the two or three most important sites for the study of religion, and it remains so to say. What do I mean? I mean, with its 700 ethnic groups, 1,300 languages, it was a site in which the challenge of religious diversity, the topic of religious diversity in a situation of far-reaching political economic change, lay at the heart of the way in which religion was studied. You might think, well, wasn't that how it's always done? No, it wasn't. The academic study of religion in the West begins much earlier, of course, but it begins to take a modern form at the end of the 19th century in a context of global colonization. So there are both imperial imperatives that shape it, Tal al-Assad, and many others have reminded us of that. But it cannot be reduced to a colonial project. It, like many academic disciplines, quickly acquired a kind of autonomy, integrity, and complexity that reflected the world in which it was engaging, And that was especially fortunate and productive in the Indonesian context because of the situation that you had 1,300 languages, 700 ethnic groups, and indeed extraordinary religious diversity. An Africanist friend of mine, Parker Shipton at the Boston University, who happens to work in Africa, but he reads extensively on Indonesia. He says, Indonesia is the one country in the world where you have the comparable degree of religious diversity as you have in Africa. And I think that's true, and that shaped the way in which religion was done. But it took much time, and it was a slow process because it was linked at first to a very imperial project of understanding religion so as to control and colonize its adherents. But very quickly, it moved forward in a way that reflected the integrity and specificity all of its own. Case in point, when Dutch scholars in the early 19th century came to Indonesia and studied it, as Michael Laffen, I don't know if he's here tonight, but I believe he's going to be here at the AAS conference. But as he and many others have pointed out, Haji Alatas, when Islam was first studied, European scholars assumed that it was more or less unitary and that its most authentic expression lay in jurisprudence. And here you had Dutch scholars arrive in a country in which madrasas on the Middle Eastern variety were relatively new. yes, there had been centers of religious education, Islamic education for some centuries, but the rise of the madrasa as a regional institution really dates from the late 18th and most especially from the 19th century, whereas in the Middle East it had been in place from the 10th and 11th and 12th centuries. And it shaped an Islamic culture that had, yes, great diversity, as Shahab Ahmed reminded us, has recently reminded us, but not the diversity that was characteristic of Indonesia. So diversity, plurality and diversity were characteristics of the project of studying Islam and the project of studying religion in Indonesia from the start. Linked again to colonial projects, another important wing of religious studies in Indonesia that marked the field from very early on was the study of populations that were the target of Christian missionizing. This did not extend for colonial reasons of colonial interest. The Dutch were very careful to discourage the academic study of, missionization in Muslim majority regions, but they gave full locomotive authorization to missionization in eastern Indonesia, in Mentawai, parts of Sumatra where you did not have Muslim majority populations. So a second wing, so in addition to Islamic studies being configured in a new way here in Indonesia from the late 19th century on, recognizing its diversity and recognize the tension, a creative tension, between fiqh and local culture. In addition to that, you had a second distinctive characteristic of the study of religion in Indonesia, or the East Indies and Indonesia, that remains a characteristic today, which came from Christian studies. And a recognition that you can't, again, just as with Islam, you can't simply study the normative traditions of Christianity. You have to study in what is today referred to as enculturation. That, of course, is not a term that was used at the time, but the spirit was there. Move forward, and I realize I'm coming to the end of my time. Move forward, a third characteristic of the study of religion in Indonesia that, again, I'm suggesting there's great continuity rather than rupture. A third characteristic was that we get to the 1950s, Indonesia becomes one of three major sites after Western Europe. India, Nigeria, and Indonesia are the major foci of what is a new wave in the study of religion, and that's the multidisciplinary study of religion. This was best exemplified, of course, by my senior friend, now deceased, Clifford Geertz's and Hilly Geertz's and Robert Jay's study. But that legacy would influence a whole generation of Western scholars of religion, not just scholars not just scholars of Islam, but scholars of religion generally. So that by the time we get to the independence period, I end here, by the time we get to the independence period, there's a new momentum in the study of religion around the world, a new momentum in the study of religion in Indonesia that has, if you will, distanced itself, not entirely, but distanced itself significantly from its colonial origins and projects of colonial domination, emphasizing diversity and plurality in a context first of ongoing political and economic change, and then when you get to the Geertz's and the Jay, in a context of nation making and transformation. And last but not least, that leads to two additional foci to which the study of religion in Indonesia has made such a vital contribution and which remain characteristic of it as it moves forward into the future, and that is an emphasis from very early on the study of women. Not sufficiently, but it was there. Again, my friend, dear friend and teacher, not immediate teacher, but a major influence on me was Hilly Geertz, the first senior academic outside of my dissertation committee who read my dissertation on Hindu Javanese Tangga tradition and Islam. Contacted me with a letter, no emails in those days. But she, in 1961, based on her research 52 to 54, pioneered, along with a whole community of other people, the idea that in studying religion in society, women have to be given much more pride of place. And that has remained now under the auspices primarily of Indonesian women scholars, primarily under the auspices, it has remained a trademark distinction and a legacy of Indonesian studies that will carry to the further. Last but not least, the other final thing, so in the 1950s, 1960s, it's nation making and nation tearing. If you read The Religion of Java, and particularly the middle sections, Abangan Santri, and then the final chapter, it's a book of, it's not a book, Gertz gets some things wrong, but he gets some things right. And the thing he gets right is that religion and politics are interwoven in a deeply troubling but also creative way from the 19th century to the time they're doing their research. And that emphasis, that recognition has contributed, to my last point, to what I think is a trademark characteristic of just about everybody who's up here. And I look around, look at my Indonesian colleagues and friends, a trademark of Indonesian scholars themselves who now lead the field. We learn, we Western, Japanese, Chinese, Australian scholars, we learn from and are in many ways derivative of now of our Indonesian scholarly friends. But one thing that we have come to recognize is the centrality of religion in the shaping of public culture, public ethics, the secularization theory that even Clifford Geertz, I know this from having worked with him in 1982, in 1981-82, even in the, he said, he recognized in the 1950s, he was a believer in the ongoing decline and event, not total demise, but ongoing decline of religion. And indeed, if you read Islam Observed, which I think is his weakest book, Religion of Java, I think, is brilliant. Islam Observed, I think, is full of all sorts of contradictions and inerrancies. So it was a moment in his life where he was closer in spirit to a soon-to-die secularization thesis. But he clearly came to recognize, no, that religion is alive and well, not just in Indonesia, but in around the world. In the United States, sometimes in a destructive, divisive form, but often quite the contrary. Robert Bellah was one of Clifford Geertz's most closest friends, and Robert Bellah, who had his shortcomings, was a true believer in the idea that religion is a critical part of public culture in the West and in Muslim majority countries. That I've emphasized primary, last sentence, I've emphasized tonight, legacies more than I have the futures, because I think the legacies have ensured that the study of religion in Indonesia is going to continue to remain what it has been for the better part of a century, which is one of the most fertile and one of the most productive centers for the study of religion, politics, and society in the world. Research that is now being led primarily, as I said, this is my last sentence, by Indonesian scholars themselves. And we bersyukur, we give thanks and give blessing to our Indonesian colleagues and friends for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Bob. I think a lot that we have wrote down from many, especially, you know, like all the characteristics that he mentioned. I mean, like a very brief explanation of many years, like what, 70 years probably of study of Islam, religion in Indonesia, but also on, related to Islam.